So first of all, I'd like to welcome you all to this talk. And I'm going to be saying something about the history behind the great publication of Cryptomenytices and Cryptographiae, which is a very famous cryptographic or cipher manual that was published in 1624. And some of the information about the network that the author was connected to. So to summarize it all, so in this talk, I'll be giving some background information about the great cipher manual, Cryptomenytices and Cryptographiae, and its author, Augustus the Younger, the Duke of Brunswick and Lüneburg, and the secret society and intelligence networks with which he was involved. Cryptomenytices and Cryptographiae was published in 1624, the year immediately after the publication of the 1623 twin folios, Francis Bacon's De Dignitate et Augmentis Scientiarum, that's his Latin version of what he called the advancement of learning, but much expanded, and the Shakespeare First Folio, Mr. William Shakespeare's Comedies, Histories, and Tragedies. And Cryptomenytices provides keys to the cryptography in both the 1623 publications, as also to the cryptography in many other publications of that time, which were composed by members of the Society of the Golden and Rosy Cross, whose Grand Master was Sir Francis Bacon, who in 1620 was created Viscount St. Alban after the name of the saint for a specific reason. It was named after the saint and not the place St. Albans, which many people get wrong. It was named after the saints. I repeat that. Now, this society, which was formed at the beginning of the 1570s in England under the name of the Golden and Rosy Cross, was part of a network of Magian societies spread throughout Europe, who shared their inspirations, ideas, philosophies, and discoveries, and passed on the ancient wisdom with newly discovered wisdom or interpretations of it. The Rosy Cross Society's work started to be prepared sub rosa, that means kept secret from the general public, when the supernova in Cassiopeia, the celestial queen, appeared in the sky in 1572 and continued to shine brighter than Venus until 1574. So people could even see it in daylight with their naked eye. So it's amazing. As the Cassiopeia constellation was known by the Magi to overlight the British Isles, which they could see as a result of Gerardus Mercator producing both a celestial and a terrestrial globe, the supernova signaled to them that the great light or master soul they had been expecting, as prophesied by Paracelsus, had been born as the son of the Queen Elizabeth I of England. Now, this son was secretly born on the 22nd of January, 1561, and straightway adopted into the Bacon family as Francis Bacon, son of the Lord Keeper, Sir Nicholas Bacon, and his wife, Lady Anne, née Cook. And she was the chief of the ladies in waiting because she was married to the Lord Keeper. And it was whilst the supernova in Cassiopeia shone brightly in the heavens that Francis Bacon, who was then a student at Cambridge University, experienced the great vision of his life's work. And when in 1603 there was a great conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter, followed in 1604 by a supernova in the Fiacus, the serpent bearer, it not only confirmed who the great master was, but also gave the signal to make the work known more widely and publicly. So from 1604 onwards, the ideals and work of this Rosy Cross society, which basically were the advancement of learning and reformation of the arts and sciences in order to bring about a worldwide illumination or golden age, was spread abroad from England via the network of Magian societies and individual magi, together with the publication of books and manifestos. And it was this network of intelligence that Duke Augustus was involved with, he being one of the magi or masters of the Renaissance Hermetic Kabbalistic Christian philosophy. Now, from now on, I'm going to share my screen. So Cryptomenytices and Cryptographiae, meaning Cryptomenytics and Cryptography, was compiled and written by Augustus the Younger, Duke of Brunswick-Lüneburg, when he resided at Hitzacker, before he became Prince of Brunswick-Wolfenbüttel in 1634, and then Prince of Dannenberg in 1636. This 9-book cipher manual was published in folio format in Lüneburg in 1624, using Duke Augustus's pseudonym Gustavus Silanus as the author. Now, the Prince of Lüneburg at that time was Christian the Elder, Duke of Brunswick-Lüneburg, who had inherited the princedom and title when his older brother Ernest died in 1611. And both brothers, Ernest and Christian, were sons of Duke William of Brunswick-Lüneburg, Augustus the Younger's uncle, and were therefore Augustus's cousins. The title Duke of Brunswick-Lüneburg was held by various members of the Welf family, including brothers and cousins, the lands of which were often divided between them, with a resulting profusion of additional titles. The lands of the Duchy of Brunswick-Lüneburg were located in what is now northwestern Germany and were divided into several princedoms. So I'm showing you that now. Augustus the Younger was born at Dannenberg Castle on the 10th of April 1579 as the second surviving son of Henry III, Duke of Brunswick-Lüneburg and Prince of Dannenberg, and his wife, Princess Ursula of Saxe-Lauenburg, daughter of Duke Francis of Saxe-Lauenburg. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right, Lauenburg. Augustus was nicknamed the Younger in order to distinguish him from his cousin, Augustus the Elder, Duke of Brunswick-Lüneburg. So you can see how confusing all this is. Augustus's father had originally been the Prince of Lüneburg, inheriting the title in 1559 when his elder brother Otto died, and ruling it jointly with his younger brother William. However, when Henry married the Ascanian Princess Ursula in 1569, he and William fell out with each other over who ruled what, causing a problem for the whole family. So Henry eventually waived his rights to the Lüneburg Principality, allowing his younger brother William and his heirs to become the ruling Prince of Lüneburg. And in return, Augustus received the Principality of Dannenberg plus an annual payment as compensation. The father of Augustus, and an assurance that his descendants would be entitled to inherit the Brunswick-Wolfenbüttel estates if the existing family lineage should ever become extinct. And the Brunswick-Wolfenbüttel line did in fact become extinct when Frederick Ulrich, Duke of Brunswick-Lüneburg, died in 1634 without heirs, which meant that in 1634 Augustus the Younger became Prince of Brunswick-Wolfenbüttel. And Augustus's elder brother was Julius Ernst, who became Prince of Dannenberg upon their father Henry's death in 1598. When Julius Ernst died in 1636, Augustus then became Prince of Dannenberg, as well as the Prince of Brunswick-Wolfenbüttel. So it's all very complicated, really, but I tried to make a synopsis of it for you. Now let's go in deeper into it properly. Augustus the Younger received an especially good education, first at home, and then as a student at the University of Rostock for a year, 1594 to 1595. Then at the University of Tübingen for 3 years, 1595 to 1598, where he would have met Tobias Hess, the founder of the Tübingen Circle, whose members were in contact with the Society of the Golden and Rosy Cross in England. After finishing his studies at the University of Tübingen, Augustus travelled to Strasbourg to continue his studies at the university there. In 1599, after 5 years of university studentship, Augustus went on a grand tour, journeying through France to Italy, visiting places such as Padua and Rome, and even the islands of Sicily and Malta. And on his return, Augustus then went on to visit the Netherlands and England, where he was present for the coronation of King James VI of Scotland as King James I of England on the 24th of March, 1603. And in this way, Augustus became well known in English court circles and made strong connections with the English Literary Society, including the Society of the Golden and Rosy Cross, led at that time by Francis Bacon. When returned to Germany via France, in 1604, Augustus was granted the castle and dominion of Hitzacker, plus an allowance, by his elder brother Julius Ernest, who had been the Prince of Dannenberg since their father's death in 1598. And on 9th of June 1604, Augustus took up residence in Hitzacker by the river Elbe, where he spent the next 3 decades with a small court, devoting his time to the arts and sciences and building up a large library of books and manuscripts, which he had started collecting whilst on his grand tour. And in December 1607, Augustus married Clara Maria of Pomerania-Bath, the eldest daughter of the Griffin Duke, Bogislaw XIII of Pomerania. Now, during his time at Hitzacker, Augustus first wrote a manual on chess. It was called, in German, I can't really speak German, but I'll try, Das Schach oder Königsspiel, which means in English, the chess or king's game. And this was published in folio format in Leipzig in 1616, using the Duke's pseudonym Gustavus Silenus. And the chess game that Augustus describes is courier chess. Oh, I've missed it, sorry. The medieval chess variant that was popular in German-speaking lands. Appended to the manual after the 4 books or sections on chess is a translation that Augustus made of a book called Rhythmomachia that had been written by the Italian mathematician and astronomer Francesco Barozzi and published in Venice in 1572. Rhythmomachia, also known as the Pythagorean game or philosopher's game, is a mathematical board game that was used as an educational and philosophical tool for teaching arithmetic and the mathematical harmony of the universe. It was recommended by Roger Bacon in his manuscript Communio Mathematica, meaning mathematical communion, that he wrote around 1428. And Sir Thomas More, in his book Utopia, that was published in 1516, as the inhabitants of Utopia play the game for recreation in the evenings. After writing the manual on chess, Augustus set about composing his 9-book encyclopedia, Cryptomenytices and Cryptographiae, which was published in folio form and was published in Lüneburg in 1624, again using his pseudonym Gustavus Silenus. In his correspondence with the engravers about the prints and payment for them, the Duke writes that the payment for the engravings would be forthcoming from England, which can only mean that someone in England was involved in the cryptographic manual and was sponsoring the engravings for a particular reason. And all the engravings of the title page illustrate cryptography of several kinds. The lower engraved picture, for instance, is a rebus that, with the help of a cipher whose key can be found in the title page, reveals that the figure writing at the table, supposedly the abbot Trithemius, is in fact Francis Bacon, which explains why the figure is clothed as a nobleman rather than as an abbot. Don't know if you can see that here. In fact, Augustus was in correspondence with Francis Bacon in England. Letters received from Bacon soon after the manual's publication are recorded in the catalogue of Augustus's library. And I shall talk more about these illustrations in much more detail in part 3 of the Rosicrucian Cryptographic series. That's my next talk in this series. But for now, I'll carry on with the history. Now, the year before Cryptomenytites and Cryptographiae was published, on the 19th of February 1623, Augustus's wife, Clara Maria, died with no surviving children. Just want you to take that in for a moment. Then later that year, on the 26th of October 1623, Augustus married Dorothea of Anhalt-Zerbst, daughter of the Ascanian prince Rudolf of Anhalt-Zerbst, by whom he had 5 children. Now, the title of Duke Augustus's cryptographic manual, Cryptomenytites and Cryptographiae, translates into English as Cryptomenytics and Cryptography. And cryptomenytics is a word referring to all forms of secret communication, whether by voice, or by writing, or by signs. By voice, by writing, or by signs are the 3 principal means of communication. And cryptography is the name for secret communication by writing, which includes code, cipher, number, geometry, symbolism, drawing, painting, engraving, and printing. And in his book, the Duke mentions all 3 forms of secret communication by voice, writing, and signs, but basically his encyclopedic manual is cryptographic, which is why he added the word cryptography to Cryptomenytics in his title, so as to make it absolutely clear, but also so as to point out the difference between the 2 words. And the original aim of Duke Augustus in writing his manual was to print, comment on, and elucidate what the Benedictine abbot Johannes Trithemius had written under the name of Steganographia, his initial writings on cryptography, which were considered incomplete and somewhat obtuse. Trithemius then went on to write a second cryptological work, which he named Polygraphia, which has more down-to-earth practical examples of cryptography. And Johann Trithemius, born in 1462 and died in 1516, had been an earlier Grand Magus of the Magian societies of Europe, and had taught both Paracelsus and Agrippa, who each went on to set up or inspire other societies, including the society in England that eventually called itself the Society of the Golden and Rosy Cross. Polygraphia, whose publication had been delayed because of ecclesiastical disapproval, was posthumously published in Basel in 1518, 2 years after the abbot's death. And Steganographia took nearly a century before it was published, which was done in Frankfurt in 1606. However, both these works had been circulating in manuscript from 1499 onwards. And Duke Augustus acquired manuscripts of both works, along with almost 200 other volumes relating directly or indirectly to cryptology. And the result was that the Duke's Cryptomenytices manual contained more than Trithemius's Steganographia and the Duke's comments on what the abbot had written, but also other examples and descriptions of cryptography known to the Duke, including from Trithemius's Polygraphia. Moreover, the Cryptomenytices manual is itself an example of cryptography in the way it is designed, written, illustrated, and printed. I mean, it's quite amazing, actually. Many of the examples of cryptography in the Duke's manual had been and were still being used by the English intelligence network at that time, not only to gather political intelligence, but also to communicate and spread abroad the ideas and philosophy of the Rosicrucians. And I might add to this that some of those ciphers were still being used during the last World War. So this can be spoken about now. Moreover, Cryptomenytites et Cryptographiae was published the year immediately after the publication in 1623 of the Shakespeare First Folio and Francis Bacon's De Dignitate et Augmentis Scientiarum, which was not by accident, as all three folio publications are interrelated with each other. In both the 1623 folio publications use some of the cryptographic methods that are described in the Duke's 1624 folio publication. And Bacon's De Dignitate et Augmentis Scientiarum not only names the various types of cryptographic methods, but also describes in detail a cipher that he himself invented in his youth whilst he was in Paris, called the Biliteral cipher. The Duke's second marriage occurred more or less at the same time as the publication of the two famous 1623 folio publications. So the question is, was this purely coincidence, or was it carefully arranged to twin the twin folios? Now this question arises because the purpose of publishing the two 1623 folios, the Shakespeare First Folio and Francis Bacon's Latin version of the Advancement of Learning, published them together as twins, and just a few months after a great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn had occurred, is that they were signifying the means to convert the opposites into a courtship of love that leads on to a marriage of love, not just human, but also of the arts and sciences. And such a marriage is known as a mystical marriage. the result of which is enlightenment, the birth of light. Now, the three Shakespeare poems, Venus and Adonis, The Rape of Lucrece, and The Phoenix and Turtle, illustrate this theme, with the first two poems illustrating the polarity of twinship, but at the level of lust and rape rather than one of love. And the third poem, which is appended to Love's Martyr, illustrating the result of learning to love each other, which is the mystical marriage of love. Now, the Phoenix and Turtle explains itself as a funeral elegy, with the phoenix and turtle dove becoming one in a mutual flame of love. In other words, there is a death of the opposites, followed by a resurrection or rebirth into a single realm of light or illumination. And many individuals, couples and groups have achieved this illuminating marriage of love, some only temporarily, and a few more permanently. But now that we are at the end of an old great age and the moment of birth of a new great age, there is the chance for multitudes of people the world over to achieve this illuminating marriage of love. We just have to make the effort to love each other, to love the heavens, to love the earth, to love love, the universal love, which is everywhere, in the world and throughout the whole universe. Now, Lüneburg, where Cryptomenytices et Cryptographiae was published, is a town that lies on the river Ilmenau, about 30 kilometers, that's 19 miles, from its confluence with the river Elbe. And the town was built on top of a large deposit of salt, which was a valuable commodity since ancient times, and was the town's major source of revenue during the Renaissance. The river Ilmenau flows through the town and was used to transport the salt by boat or ship to other ports of the Hanseatic League. By boat is also the way messages were sent by courier, as illustrated in the top panel of the title page of Cryptomenytices et Cryptographiae. So there's the boat and the water. Now, Lüneburg was a Hanseatic port. A much larger Hanseatic port was Hamburg, near the mouth of the river Elbe. And it was from Hamburg that the salt and other commodities were shipped in larger boats across the sea to London and to other places. And of course, the trading goods occurred in the other direction as well. And couriers often traveled in this way, as travel by water was usually safer than by land. And Hitzacker was on the river Elbe, so this suited Duke Augustus admirably. And various countries developed intelligence networks, with spies who gathered the intelligence, couriers who carried the messages, and intelligencers who ran various parts of the network and who encrypted and decrypted the various messages. But besides political intelligence, there was also communication between members of the various Magian societies, as well as the Magi visiting each other whenever they could. Duke Augustus was a Protestant, so the most notable Magian societies he linked with were the following: the English Society of the Golden and Rosy Cross, which had been led by Francis Bacon since Elizabethan times. And couriers with messages were easily able to travel by sea and river between London and Hitzacker. Then there is the Tübingen Circle, with which Augustus almost certainly made contact during the 3 years, 1595 to 1598, when he was at the University of Tübingen. The Tübingen Circle, which was in communication with the English Rosicrucian Society, had been founded by Tobias Hess. Around his dates are 1568, he was born and died in 1614. Tobias Hess was a German lawyer, theosophist, alchemist, and Paracelsian physician who resided in Tübingen, and who was a follower and promoter of his contemporary, the theologian Simon Steudian, and student of Steudian's book, Neometria. Simon Steudian created his apocalyptic book, Neometria, which is Greek, meaning temple measurement, during the years 1592 to 1604, using neometria, i.e. letter, number, and geometry, cryptographic calculations, to extract from the Bible revelations about a golden age of Christ's reign that was about to dawn. These prophetic revelations were similar to the visions and teaching of the three ages by the 12th century abbot Joachim von Fiori. The book Neometria also contains a history of the cross and of the rose, and the significance of the union of the two as the Rosy Cross. It also mentions that there was a meeting at Lüneburg on the 17th of July, 1586, which the King of Navarre, the King of Denmark, and the Queen of England attended in order to form a Protestant league, the Confederatio Militiae Evangelicae, as a defense against the Catholic League. Simon Steudian's main patron was Frederick I, Duke of Württemberg, from 1593, who supported alchemy, scientists, and the fine arts, had strong connections with England, and was made a Knight of the Garter in 1603. The Tübingen Circle, which consisted of 12 principal members, included amongst its membership at one time or another Christopher Bessold, who was a lawyer who studied jurisprudence, knew 9 languages, including Arabic and Hebrew, was a Kabbalist and mystic, and in the early 1590s was a close friend of Johannes Kepler. Another one was Tobias Adami, and another one was Wilhelm Wentz, who were disciples of the Italian friar Tommaso Campanella, author of La Città del Sole, City of the Sun. And another member at one time or another was Johann Valentin Andrea, who is the author of the Chemical Wedding of Christian Rosenkreuz. Now, based upon their desire for and anticipation of the Golden Age foretold by Joachim of Fiori, their focus was to deepen their knowledge concerning the Bible and nature, and to live a charitable life characterized by love for God and neighbor. And Tobias Hess had carried out alchemical experiments with Johann Valentinus Andreas' father in the Andreas house at Herrenberg near Tübingen, where Johann Valentin Andrea was born on the 17th of August, 1586. Then there was the Societas Christiana, the Christian Society, founded in 1604 at Kassel by Moritz, the Landgrave of Hesse-Kassel, whose members wore the livery of a rose. At the same time as he founded the Societas Christiana, Moritz also built at Kassel the first permanent roofed theatre in Germany called the Ottoneum, which still exists today. Moritz, who was styled the Learned, was an Anglophile and maintained close connections with England. His father had been William IV of Hesse-Kassel, called William the Wise, a notable patron of the arts and sciences, and a pioneer in astronomical research, who founded the first European observatory in 1564 in his castle at Kassel, and who was not only on friendly terms with the Danish astronomer Tycho Brahe, but was also himself responsible for calculating many stellar positions. Moritz, who carried on the interests of his father, was a great patron of alchemists and medical men, and he headed an extensive hermetic network across the German states and had laboratories built at Kassel for scientific alchemical research. And he was patron of the University of Marburg, whose great chemistry faculty, under the direction of Johann Hattmann, maintained a close relationship with Exeter College, Oxford. Moritz was an enthusiastic supporter of the performing arts and employed a company of English comedians at his court in Kassel, including musicians such as John Dowland. It was largely via the strolling players and the musicians who accompanied them that encrypted letters were transported back and forth, and Masonic and Rosicrucian ideas were communicated. Now, in 1614, the first Rosicrucian manifesto, the Fama Fraternitatis RC, was published in Kassel under the auspices of Moritz. And in 1615, its twin manifesto, the Confessio Fraternitatis RC, was published again at Kassel. And by 1615, following the publication of Fama Fraternitatis RC, Moritz's Christian Society had become known as a branch or chapter of the Rosy Cross. And the society was comprised of Moritz plus 11 other officers, 12 in all, as in other such like societies. And other members included at various times were Johann Valentinus Andrea, Michael Meyer, Raphael Eglinus, Anthony Theiss, and Professor Jungmann. And Michael Meyer, who between 1611 and 1616 regularly visited England, where he first heard of the Rosicrucians, became Moritz's court physician in 1619. Now, with the help of Moritz, in 1613, Prince Frederick V, Elector of the Palatinate, married Princess Elizabeth, daughter of James I of England, 6th of Scotland. And the marriage celebrations were organized by Francis Bacon. Immediately after their marriage, Frederick and Elizabeth established a center of Rosicrucian activity at their castle in Heidelberg. In 1619, the Bohemian Confederacy elected Frederick King of Bohemia, and soon after he was proposed as Holy Roman Emperor by the Protestant prince-electors, the previous emperor Matthias having died in March 1619. So later that year, having accepted the Bohemian Confederacy's offer, Frederick moved with his wife and court to Prague, where he was crowned King of Bohemia. But the three spiritual electors, who are all Roman Catholic archbishops, wanted a Roman Catholic emperor. And this immediately galvanized Ferdinand, son of Charles II, Archduke of Austria and Holy Roman Emperor until his death in 1590, to rally his forces against Frederick and the Protestant princes. The result of this was the defeat of Frederick and the Protestant army at the Battle of the White Mountain on the 8th of November, 1620. And the remaining Protestant prince-electors then gave in to the Roman Catholics. And so Ferdinand was elected and crowned Holy Roman Emperor as Ferdinand II, the successor to Matthias. And Frederick was outlawed, but continued opposing Ferdinand and the Catholic forces as much as possible. His wife Elizabeth took refuge at The Hague under the protection of Frederick Henry, the Prince of Orange. And at The Hague, some Rosicrucian activity continued. So this was the network that became the Rosicrucian network during the time when Augustus was writing his chess manual and cryptographic manual, the network working with and disseminating the ideas of Francis Bacon's great inspiration, which was the Rosicrucian work. This great inspiration was announced to the world under that name in 1620, in a publication of that name, together with Novum Organum, the new method by which it could be achieved. And this was followed in 1623, when a Saturn-Jupiter great conjunction occurred, with the publication of De Dignitate et Augmentis Scientiarum and the Shakespeare First Folio. And the next year, 1624, Duke Augustus's Cryptomenytices and Cryptographiae was published, all in right timing. So I shall talk more about this right timing and the resulting blazing star, like that of the Bethlehem star which the Magi followed to find the baby Jesus, in my last talk of this series. I think it will be my last talk. It may be another talk anyway. In my next talk in this series, however, I shall focus on the Cryptomenytites and Cryptographiae title page and reveal many of the profound things that it tells us cryptographically. But good title pages, like entrances to temples or Gothic cathedrals, are gateways to truth. I shall end my screen sharing. So that's the end of my talk. A lot of history and so on for you to take in, but it's important. The dates are important, and how they interlink with each other are so important, as I'm sure you realize. So that's my end of my talk. So I'll say thank you. Thank you very much. And we'll